in sync. I will now call this revenue meeting to order. Will you please call the roll?
Senator Case. Present. Senator French.
Here.
Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Chairman McEwen.
Here.
All present, Mr. Chairman.
The first bill for consideration is Senate File 60. And I will have Senator French step down and cover it for us. It's sales tax distribution rates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I pass out some info?
Please.
Apologies for not getting this to everybody sooner, but. Mr. Chairman, may I proceed?
Please do.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, this bill is,
Please announce your name for the audience.
Senator Tim French, Senate District 18. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
This is pretty simple bill. I almost get nervous saying that. But currently, everybody in the state pays 4% sales tax. Some counties pay an additional 1 cent, 2 cent. I think you can illegally go up to 3 cents maybe. There's a couple counties that just are at the 4%. My county being one of them, and I don't remember which the other one was. But what this bill does, you pay your 4% sales tax wherever you purchase something that's taxable. All that money goes to the state. They keep 69% of it. It goes into the general fund. The other 31% comes back out to the cities, towns, and counties based on population. They keep 1% for administrative purposes. What this bill does is changes that formula. The state's share goes from 69% to 65%. What goes out to the cities, towns, counties goes from 31%, essentially 30% in actual dollars, to 35%. And after they take the 1% administrative out, it's 34%. And in the chart, real quick, I'll kind of point out a few things. The first one that has the percentages and stuff on it, the first and second one are identical. The first one you're looking at that says in the left-hand upper corner, sales tax distribution, then it lists fiscal year 2016 through 2024. And then below it, use tax distribution, same years. And you'll see as you go along, when COVID struck, what it did to us, and the big effect was 2021, fiscal year 21. It dropped $16+ million from the year before. Then it bounced up in 2022 to additional 54,770,000. Fiscal year 23 jumped again, and you'll see in the next column over the percentage, jumped up 14.4% to 72 million 393, 254 difference. Then 2024, it jumped again, 6.2%. My bill, none of that comes back to the city, towns, and counties comes out of the general fund. Doesn't come out of the LISRA, doesn't come out of anyone, just never makes it in that account, those accounts. And the fiscal note on mine is the first year, which will be 2026. At the back of the bill for fiscal year 26, it's 38. The effect is going back out to the cities, towns, and counties, $38.6 million. Now, if you look at your last page, it was the Craig report, fiscal year, their projections, January of 24, so a year ago, their projection for 25 was $661.8 million increase. They revised that in October to 651.4, so a difference of 1.6. And they're the experts. You know, there was a 1.6% revision. Possibly it could go the other way if there's a lot of oil and gas activity in the next few years. So with that, the increases from your first, and hopefully I'm not going, the October 2024 forecast of 650, the revised is $651.4 million versus 2024 on that first page that has all the percentages and stuff of $609.419064 million. So it increases by $42 million with the revised $42 million and change going into the general fund, additional. Well, my bill takes out 38 million of that. So there's still additional money going into the general fund. It's just less going in there. And that's the gist of the bill. I've talked with Department of Revenue, Brett Fanning and Brenda Henson on this. And if I can phone a friend, maybe they can come up and help answer any questions on this. So that's the gist of it. It just changes the percentage. It sends more money back out. And we all know, I'll just speak to my county, and I think every county is probably similar. Like when I was county commissioner, when I first started, and I know it was a long time ago, but a road grader was like $70,000 for road and bridge. When I left 18 years later, it was well over $300,000. So, and we helped support the senior citizens in Palcody and Meeteetse, Crisis Intervention Center. There was a number of things that we did. So this is a little extra help. You're spreading out 38 million across 23 counties. So it's a couple million back for each county. It's based on population. So if they could come up and help me out here. Thank you, Brett. And some of the, if I may, Mr. Chairman, ask Brett Fanning to kind of discuss all these statutory, the environment statutes and some that are trying to, if he could go through all that, because I just get, be honest with you, I get bogged down with it. There's so many that it's referring to that I'd like him to kind of clarify some of that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brett Fanning, Excise Tax Administrator at the Department of Revenue. So just outlining the bill, on page number 2, lines 6 and 7, just as Senator French had outlined, this is just updating the percentage. So going from 69 to 65. And so that part is very straightforward, just updating a percentage. When you get on to page 2 and then you go lines 12 through 18, this is just, it's doing two things here. The first part is it's really just getting rid of some obsolete language that is no longer in use. And quite frankly, from an administrative perspective, this gets confusing. Distribution is one of the hardest things when I'm answering questions on trying to explain. So as Senator French outlined, so we've got the 69% going to the general fund. So we've got 31% left. Well, lines 12, 13, and 14, until June 30th, 2004, obviously we are past that. And so it's just striking that language because it's no longer in use, 20 plus years ago. Well, from this 31%, you've actually got 1%. And that is what is happening in lines 15 through 18. So from this 1%, this is our direct distribution statute. That's really what this is. So we guarantee direct distributions both on the sales tax side and on the use tax side on another page. So lines 13 through 18, 19, 20, just direct distribution. And Senator French's legislation here does nothing to the direct distribution. It remains the same. Each month, we send the counties a certain amount of sales tax and a certain amount of use tax, no matter what. Then from what's remaining, we use the distribution formulas outlined based on population. So nothing's changing, just getting rid of some obsolete language going down on page 2. Any questions with that perspective?
Go ahead, Senator Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, real quick, direct distribution. So just to clarify that, what happens to the 1%, the fee in there on that 1%? Is that before or after the direct distribution? How does that work? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, outstanding question. Okay, so we've got the 4%. So the two counties that only have 4% are Park County and Sublette County. And so we've got 4%, 69% of that state general fund. Then we've got this 31%. From that 31%, the state general fund gets another percentage. So really, there's a little more than 69% going to the state general fund. What we have remaining is 30%. 1% of that 30% is tied to a direct distribution. So what that means is our statutes are guaranteeing the counties are going to get an equal amount. As you can see in here on line 18, 40,000, divide that by 12, it's $3,333.33. So no matter what, the counties are going to get that amount of sales tax. Then we come down from the remaining percentages and distribute it based on population. So to answer your question, Senator Ide, 69% state general fund. What's left, 1% goes for administration costs back to the state. Then the rest goes into distribution to our local partners.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
I have a quick question before
Yes,
we
sir.
go on. I just want to make sure we clarify this. The rate at which the counties or cities tax doesn't affect their distribution, it's just population.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For this particular, the statewide 4%, yes.
Thank you.
Mr.
Go ahead, Senator
Chairman,
French.
if I may ask Mr. Fanning to kind of run us through when that money comes in and that money goes back out, that 30%, it never really actually makes it to the general fund, does it?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is correct. 69% general fund, the rest we distribute right out. Does not come in and then go back out as far as general fund. No, the state of Wyoming general fund does not get that 30%.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman, but it never makes it, I mean, as that money comes in, state takes their 69%. None of that other than administrative, of that 31% goes into the general fund. You redistribute it back out.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir, that's correct. Mr. Chairman, if I could continue, so then we come on to page 3, lines 12 through 15. Again, this is just updating. It's a unique distribution statute. So this paragraph F, again, the stricken language there, just getting rid of some old distribution language that probably should have been removed long ago. But we still track the amount of sales and use tax that's collected from out-of-state vendors. Now, you may recall that it gets distributed the exact same way, because it's referencing paragraph B3, which is what I was just talking about on page 2, lines 12 all the way through the rest of the page. We still track it that way, but it follows the same distribution formula. I get a lot of questions about this, if we still need this paragraph, because it gets distributed the same way. Now, we do track it when we send our county transmittals to the county, cities, and towns. They can see what comes in from in-state versus out-of-state, but it does follow the same distribution formula as all of our other in-state vendors as well. Then, Mr. Chairman, carrying on to page 4, just our use tax statutes here. And it's important to note that sales and use tax are distributed, for the most part, the exact same way as Senator French outlined on page 4, line 8, just going from 69 to 65%, no additional items of note there. Then on page 4, lines 14 through the rest of the page, 20, again, just getting rid of some antiquated language. The direct distribution for use tax is a little different. It's still all going to the same spot, but the guarantee there is $10,000 annually. Divided by 12, our county distributions are going to see a payment for use tax of $800 and some dollars. I know every single taxpayer dollar is important, $800 and some dollars. So again, use tax, the same as sales tax for distribution, 69% state general fund, 1% admin fee, the rest goes to our local partners. Stepping on to page 5, lines 12 through 16, just like I outlined before with the sales tax statutes, getting rid of some antiquated language and then updating it up to the 35%. So the distribution, really in the simplest of terms, is taking away, I don't know if that's the right term, removing 4% from what's going into the state general fund and then giving an additional percent, if that's the right term, to our local partners. And this bill is effective July 1, 2025. I reached out to our IT partners, and this is a fairly quick IT fix. The Department of Revenue itself did not have any fiscal note for this, other than the amount of taxpayer dollars that are shipped in funds. So with that, Mr. Chairman, stand for any questions.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may interject here, when Mr. Fanning referenced on page 4 the 10,000 annually and the 800, that's monthly coming back. So.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Do you have any other public comment? Come on up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Jim Ford, member of the Campbell County Commission, here today speaking on behalf of the State County Commissioners Association.
Welcome to Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senators, if I may. Just wanted to comment briefly on SF 60 here on behalf of our staff and our policy committee. And preface those comments by reiterating what Senator French stated as far as this bill effectively increasing the local distributions by 4% and reducing the state portion of the sales tax by 4%. And we understand that again to, approach roughly $40 million per year in fiscal years 26, 27, and 28 in distributions back to the localities. And while also understanding the impact to the state general fund, this is something that the State Association of Commissioners would support in as much as it brings some additional revenue back to the localities. I think it's important to note that just because the way that the local portion is distributed, that in as much as you're considering this, that this should not be viewed as a direct replacement for property tax reductions. In Campbell County, for instance, just because of the population distribution, where the counties would receive 100% of property taxes first, we'd receive about 30% of the distribution based on the local calculation on population. And so we'd just like the committee to consider that as you work this bill through, and in as much as it does bring some additional revenues back to the locality, we would support this bill.
I would tell you, this is not tied to any property tax. It's standalone.
Yeah.
So it's not a substitute.
Great, thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Well, thank you,
Mr.
Commissioner.
Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
I'm Bob McLaurin with the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. This is Kelly Millar. She's the town clerk in Upton. Just wanted to echo what the county commissioners representative said. We support this bill very much and appreciate Senator French bringing it. So thank you for your consideration. I think the clerk has a couple comments as well.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you so much for letting us be here. Like Bob said, my name is Kelly Millar and I serve as the clerk treasurer for the town of Upton. I really want to thank you for bringing up this bill. It's my privilege to be here to represent my town and to work with the legislature on important issues that affect our citizens and empower our local leaders in making decisions for our communities. With that said, we are supportive of Senate File 60 as it starts the conversation for realigning sales tax distributions between the state and local governments. In doing some cowboy math, and that was a term I was taught today, we've seen that the change proposed in this bill would increase sales tax distribution to the town of Upton by approximately $12,000 per year based on our expected budget for fiscal year 2025. In Cody, the increase is approximately $154,000, and so it's relative to the tax base in each location, of course. Further down the page on our math, we calculate the potential loss from the property tax with the long-term homeowners exemption, and that loss is approximately $31,000 for the town of Upton. So it's not quite the offset we were hoping for when we're looking at revenue sources. But when we're trying to navigate changes in tax reform in Wyoming, we've got to look at the big picture there. So it of course doesn't contemplate, this math doesn't contemplate any other property tax reductions, exemptions, or sales tax exemptions that we're looking at, just these two pieces. And that's the net effect for us. So again, we appreciate this bill and we're looking forward to being a part of the solution for relief and the ability to continue to provide the services for the people that we all serve. And I would ask for your favorable consideration and I would stand for any questions.
Questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other public comment?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Mike Thompson, I'm Chief of Police for Evansville. Something also to consider, I think the committee would have interest in. These direct distributions have direct impact to any of the public safety for the communities. I've had the privilege of serving in 3 communities in our state, so I get to see the impacts of how the money flows in and out. And since COVID, with the inflationary rate, like a patrol unit, replacing a patrol unit, last year I paid $38,000 for one, and this year I'm looking at $45,000 to $48,000 ones. So beyond our equipment and everything else, it also goes towards any pay and stuff. And each community in the state of Wyoming has its own uniqueness. It's like Evansville, we sit in Natrona County, so we have to compete with, say, the city of Casper, and we're an industrial city. So Mills and us have a similar issue there versus, you know, other communities that are isolated. So for that, I stand for question. I just want to bring out that these direct distributions are very pivotal to what our communities do in public safety.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For everybody in here that traveled to come to this committee, sorry, we're not asking a lot of questions, but we have a short window, just so you know, but we really appreciate you all coming and having your testimony, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Do we have anybody online?
Not for this bill, Mr. Chairman.
I will close public comment and we'll work the bill. What's your pleasure, committee? Bill's been moved by Senator Case, seconded by Senator Ide.
Mr. Chairman, I would hope we pass this bill on its committee and get it down to, you know, it's kind of, in my opinion, a chance to give local governments a better sustainable amount of revenue. There was one time when it looked like sales taxes were kind of a dead end because more things moved online, but then we were able to join with South Dakota and had a ruling from the Supreme Court that supported the collection of sales taxes online. It's really beef. And during COVID, it was amazing. All those brown trucks that rolled around, those purchases were taxed. And it looks like this is really a sustainable tax. It's a consumption tax, not a tax on wealth. It is a regressive tax, but this is not a new tax. It's just switching the percentage from the state to our local governments. And by all accounts, you know, my experience on revenue is we really have inadequate funding for most local governments in Wyoming. And we end up giving them more funding either through the direct distribution or through grants and the SLIB board and things. I think probably more than any other state, we ship more money from Cheyenne. This kind of gives them their own funds. They collect it. The purchases are made. Not all of them, I mean, some are online, but they deserve it. And I'm happy. I appreciate the good senator for bringing it and hope we support it.
And as you probably know, of all the taxes, consumption tax is my favorite.
I think it's a couple of your favorites, and that's good too. Although, just remember, Mr. Chairman, not everybody, a consumption tax can be regressive. It is, you know, because you have, as a poor person, you spend more of your income than you can save relative to people with more income. So that part is regressive, but this is not expanding the amount of taxes. It's not a new tax. It's just the state giving more money to local government.
Any other comments? Want to call the roll?
This is a roll call vote on Senate File 60, sales tax distribution rates. Senator Case?
Aye.
Senator French?
Aye.
Senator Ide?
Aye.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
We have 5 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
You'll take that up on the floor?
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move on to Senate File 96, the Wyoming Gold Act. Senator Ide?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Revenue, my name is Bob Ide, Senate District 29, Natrona County. Got a bill here that is very similar to the one we brought a couple of years ago. It's been scaled down to a certain degree. It's a pretty simple bill. The one we ran a couple of years ago, before I get into the bill, had maybe a little more cumbersome as far as allowing industry to pay their taxes to the state in precious metals if they so choose. We do have a gold mine going in between here and Laramie. That would be an opportunity for them. But effectively what this bill does is, bottom line, without getting into the bill, it requires the state treasurer to invest in specie or specie legal tender. And for those maybe in the body that don't understand that, we passed a bill back in 2018. It was called the Wyoming Legal Tender Act, which took away taxation on gold and silver, bullion, coins, and actually made it legal tender, just like the US Constitution, kind of reaffirmed the US Constitution. That's about the only thing allowed legally is legal tender. If you really want to be a purist on the Constitution, is paying your taxes in gold. So anyway, playing off of that original bill back in 2018, this kind of amends that, which allows the treasurer to hold gold and study, the best way to augment other investments in the state. I've talked to the state treasurer about this as well. I think he's in favor of it. He's here today, may want to speak on this bill. But let's just go through the bill real quick here. So on page 2, or page 1, it says the state treasurer shall implement this article by, and Romanet I, holding no less than $10 million in specie and specie legal tender between and across all state managed accounts for the purpose of diversifying state investment portfolio. And then here's where it gets into preserving capital and ensuring against inflation, debt defaults, and other risks. So I passed a handout to you up there. If you want to take a quick look at that, the inflation part of this is a lot of what's driving this bill. You've got a little chart there that shows the price of gold next to US debt. And it starts about 1970. That's 1970 or 1971 is when Nixon closed the gold window, supposedly temporary, where we went to a complete fiat currency where nothing was backed by gold around the world. Effectively, we were the last country to come off of that from the Bretton Woods. All foreign countries could actually redeem their dollars in gold if they chose to, but they printed too much money. They couldn't honor their commitment to those foreign nations to give them back their gold because we didn't have enough gold for all the dollars that were claim checks on that. So this chart sort of explains you know, just kind of shows what is going on in the world right now. It's a policy. Inflation is a policy. It's not an act of God. I mean, obviously you have supply and demand considerations, but if you look at that chart on the debt, you know, gold fairly well tracks that over time. I mean, it's been a store of value for thousands of years. And, you know, this chart's just a little bit old here as well, too. I mean, it's a year old, and you can see on this chart, you know, the debt at that time in a year ago, effectively in 2023, it was like 31 trillion. We're another $5-6 trillion over and above that. And you can see the price of gold a year ago was about 2,000, and right now, I'm not sure, it didn't look today, it's anywhere from a little over $2,700 an ounce. So it's continuing to track the policy of inflation, which is not, in my mind, maybe the DOGE team back in Washington, I'm hopeful will help that. But I mean, we're on a trajectory of $2 trillion deficit spending for as far as the eye can see. I mean, the interest on our national debt is over $1 trillion now. It's more than our defense budget, and almost more than discretionary spending. So I saw an article just a couple of days ago. These are CBO numbers, Congressional Budget Office numbers, projected in 10 years, another $24 trillion in national debt. And that's status quo. That's with no recessions, you know, and if we continue on a $2 trillion deficit spending trajectory, all we can do is print more money and monetize that debt. So all this it's a minimal amount. It's kind of get us on the map that we believe in honest, sound money. And we need to protect our state, our citizens, and, you know, against a potential calamity down the road. So I'll move forward into the bill. Sorry to carry on so much on that. The bill also allows, if market conditions warrant, investing in precious metals or bonds payable in precious metals. The state treasurer may contract services with established precious metal firms and other industry experts to assist with the duties of the treasurer under this section. The state treasurer shall require financial disclosures along with other requirements. So basically here, you know, gives them sort of the green light to do some research on this, figure out the best way to hold the metal. You know, we do have a depository in Wyoming now that's up and running, so we can keep it close to home. We don't have to have it in some big bullion bank in New York City. It'll be here, and we can lord over it here without having to worry about a third party in some foreign state. Let's see, Section 2 is just the timing on this. Shall adopt the rules by January 1st of 2026. And this Section 3 is something that we really didn't have before. It says the state treasurer shall conduct a study analyzing the role of precious metals in augmenting stabilization and ensuring the economic security of prosperity of the state and the families, residents, businesses of the state. The study under this section shall include a review of methods for the state to begin accepting gold and silver as payment. So, you know, the old bill sort of require, but they can start studying, you know, if the dollar goes to confetti like the Weimar Germany did back in the 20s, then we at least have a way to trade. And I'm not being a doomsdayer. I'm just saying, just being cautious for the future of deficit spending. So anyway, Section B subsection B of Section 3, the state treasurer shall submit the results of the study required under Section A of this section and recommendations for the legislature resulting from the study to the Joint Revenue Committee. So that has a date on there to say we'd like to see that before October 1st of this year to the Revenue Committee to look at what the state treasurer comes up with there. And with that, that's essentially the bill. And I ask for your favorable recommendation of an aye vote. Any questions?
Questions?
Yes, Mr.
Go ahead, Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ide, I've got a couple. The first one, it's not just gold, silver, maybe platinum, whatever is deemed a good investment, a good thing to do. And then I'll have a follow-up question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Senator French. So let me just read the original bill. This was the bill in 2018 that defines specie, and that's kind of what this bill does. And it says specie means coin having gold or silver content. That's the first one. The second one is B, refined gold or silver bullion, which is coined, stamped, or imprinted with its weight and purity, valued primarily based on its metal content and not its form. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I had those thoughts in my mind. So this $10 million, we can't use props, but a 400-ounce good delivery bar is what these bullion banks store. And they weigh about 27 pounds apiece. And right now at $2,700 an ounce, a 400-ounce good delivery bar is approximately $1 million. So essentially, we would need 10 400-ounce good delivery bars. And to find a prop, you could fit them all effectively in that trash can right there. Not that I'm using that prop, but that's how much money you can, how much gold you can store in a small amount of space, and that would be $10 million. I think, I'm glad you asked the question, and I may digress here a little bit. Utah passed a similar bill to this. I think they're holding about $40 million worth of physical gold, and that's what this bill is directed at, is effectively physical gold to put in storage. So a lot of the gold bugs out there say if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So that's what this bill is directed at.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Senator Ide, my other question is, what about security? Because if there's always bad guys out there looking for a way to get somebody else's money. If the treasurer has 10 million or in the future more than that, how is that going to be secure? If they know that, they're going to be working on a plan to go get it. How is it secured? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator French, great question. I wish I had some experts here to school me on that. I do know somewhat about that. So Brinks Vault in Salt Lake City, there's another vault, a big vault, bullion vault up in Boise, Idaho. There's another one that's in Casper, Wyoming. I don't want to say names, but they have class 3 vaults, and they'll have armed guards, security, insured, and it would be similar. I always call it the Fort Knox of the West, the one that they've got going in up in Natrona County right now. So it is a concern for sure, but that's part of what the state treasurer is tasked to do, is to look for the best storage places to go with this and give us a report effectively on that. And, all of these central banks around the world, they're hoarding more gold right now than they have in the last 50 years. So they kind of know that fiat, paper money that is not backed by anything is kind of, meeting its doomsday here eventually with all of the deficit spending. As they say, the history of fiat currencies is a pretty short lifespan, actually, and effectively their intrinsic value goes to zero. That's what happens when it's not backed by some commodity.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll open it up to public comment.
Well, I guess I can say I'm a bit of a gold bug, but Don and Patrick aren't, so I'm gonna give you kind of the things that I think would probably make this bill that might actually be workable, you know. I guess I'll let you know that WRS has owned gold for about, I think, 3 years. I don't recall how much, but it's a small part of their portfolio. First year, they were kind of losing money, and then when COVID and all this stuff came in and the government started spending, and we all know what happened in that regard. So I'm just gonna go through and on some places where I think to make it work, and some of it is policy, and some of it is actually structure that we would look at. The first part basically is kind of policy on page 1, and I would say that the state treasurer is expressly authorized to implement this article by. It takes the shall out, but it expressly authorizes the state treasurer to do that. Now, there's some question about whether or not we would still have to go through the process of any asset that has to be approved, whether it's shall or expressly authorized. The process right now is that if we want to look at a different asset, we go to the investment funds committee. That's the group of professionals. They look at it. They kind of gauge it in the light of the highest return on a risk-adjusted basis, and kind of determine whether or not they want to use that asset. Then it has to go to the SLIB board, and you have to have 3 votes on the SLIB board to approve it, and that goes through the IPS. The question is whether or not, if it's a shall or expressly authorized, this is state treasurer, can they bypass those counter checks that we have in place? And I can't ask that. That's something that the AG would have to probably answer, as to whether or not, if you say shall or expressly authorized, whether a treasurer could actually buy the gold without going through those mechanisms. Some of them are in statute, so you'd have, probably some conflicting, I guess, directions by the statute as far as what can and can't be done. So that's something that I can't answer. We'd probably have to get the LSO attorneys could probably opine on that, Senator Ide, and tell us what they think,
Senator Ide, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Treasurer, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I want to softly push back, at least on the first comments there. I think you have the authorization to do that right now, to purchase gold, and we don't own any. And this is a small ask to get something started. I mean, to authorize it effectively does what they did to the bill last year or 2 years ago, and they changed the shall to a may, and the bill's a dead letter after that. So that's.
And respectfully, I agree with you on that, in that regard. But I don't know whether or not, if it is a shall, whether or not I still have to jump through those same hoops. So, if you guys could get with the AG and find out whether we have to jump through those hoops or not, I think it'd give us both a little bit more clarity about, how that process is gonna work, shall or expressly or whatever, because while both you and I are gold bugs, I brought this up probably every year that I've been there and been shot down. So that's just pretty much where we're at on that. Now, the second part that I think we ought to look at is on page 2. And I think this is really more in the structure. Let's assume that the shall means that tomorrow I can go out and buy $10 million worth of gold as soon as it becomes the law. this says we're gonna spread it across all state managed accounts. Well, we've got 500 or 600 accounts, so that would be a complete, I guess, accounting nightmare. So what I came up with is within any permanent state fund. And so that gets it down to, whether it's your anywhere from workers' comp to the state permanent mental trust fund to the school permanent fund to those permanent constitutional funds. And so at least we've got a handful of funds and not hundreds. So I think that makes perfect sense there. I guess the market conditions warrant, we're looking at that, I'm assuming that means that the state treasurer's office or the IFC or somebody's gonna make that decision about market decisions, but that's an assumption, and Don and I were saying, as soon as you assume something, that makes you something. You guys know what that makes you, So that, I think, needs a little clarity. Contract for services, I think that Senator, we've been through this, I think, on what we were contemplating, I think, was using the Casper facility. We're trying to get in touch with them to find out what that actual cost of storage and those things are. And I think my policy person, Samantha Daly will probably get in hold of you because you've got the contact information for that mint up there. That'd be all right, okay? Yeah, I think I may have it in my phone, but I know that you do, so that would get us down the road. And adopting the rules that necessary to implement that, those two that we'd have to assume what those necessarily would be. And what's happened, from time to time, when one of the state 5 elected officials makes a rule and somebody doesn't agree with them, that we have that authority expressly within the statute. So some meat on the bones on that would probably help. And Don wants to talk about that too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Treasurer. My name's Dawn Williams. I'm the Deputy State Treasurer. We're also joined here today with our Chief Investment Officer, Patrick Fleming, and he is online if you wouldn't mind bringing him in. As for I do have some comments about the bill, but just while you're talking about what rules are contemplated that would be needed in this bill, because we're unsure of that.
Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that, I'm sorry, your name again?
My name is Dawn Williams.
Thank you, Dawn. Sorry, I forgot your name. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rules, I think that left that open to the treasurer to see, how if you guys want to start accepting gold as a means of taxes, and rules on maybe you want to store the bullion in the state capitol. We got a lot of safes around here too. It's a pretty broad statement in there, but I think that's I kind of left that open for the treasurer's office to see what they wanted, and they could kind of show those rules to the revenue committee as well too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Senator French?
I think she was trying to answer, she was trying to get you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with all due respect and to Senator Ide, it's not really open. It says we shall adopt rules. And we don't contemplate the need for any rules, and the bill does not contemplate that we would unilaterally start to accept gold as legal tender. I think that's a bit of a stretch, and so I think that's where the treasurer is coming up with what rules would are contemplated precisely in this bill.
Senator French?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To enlighten me, either Senator Ide or the state treasurer. So you go buy $10 million worth of gold. Let's just say you buy gold bars and however far that goes at $2,700. And in a year, 2 years, it's $3,000 an ounce. Are you going to sell it at that point so that profit goes into the general fund? Because you're investing all kinds of money to the benefit of going into the general fund. So are we just going to store it, have it there? And at what point do we say, man, we've doubled our money, we've tripled our money, let's sell this, or is it a permanent thing? Thank you.
Well, those are all good questions, and I think that goes into the question about who makes a decision as the market conditions warrant, you know. And I think that what is kind of contemplated in this is that it's more of a permanent holding, and it's there to kind of backstop the continued inflation, because inflation will never stop. So if it's there, it's I think there are some ways where you can get some money if you like lease it to someone who's shorting gold, but that's kind of counterproductive because they're betting it's going down on your own product. But I think you can lease your gold for those situations to get some cash flow. But there again, it just allows people to try to drive the market down in one manner or another. You know, exactly how much the carry cost is going to be on that. I think we had some numbers from the Utah facility. I think the Wyoming facility might be more accommodative, but I couldn't tell you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Williams, Mr. Treasurer, how are you? Thank you. And I have some questions. You may want to defer to Mr. Fleming for the questions, but my questions are more like, what are the transactional implications of kind of doing this? How do you buy and sell? How do you know that the gold that you buy or sell or apparently receive in some kind of payment is of quality and purity? What are the discounts that when you sell? What are the transactional implications from a brokerage or however? What is the take that they take when in a gold transaction? And just are those kind of things more difficult than other securities or treasuries, or are they pretty manageable, or does it kind of take a hit out of it? Is there risk involved with things going up and down? Do we have a way of evaluating that risk in terms of our portfolio goals? Just those kind of operational things. And you can certainly defer to Mr. Fleming if you like, but those are concerns that I have.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I've heard is that there was some kind of a mint or something. I believe it was either in Washington or Oregon, and there wasn't the right oversight to make sure that the amount of gold that was in there remained in there in the right vaults, and that when it finally blew up, there was a little pile of gold in the middle of the floor and everything else was cleaned out, and I don't know where the guys went to. So there's a lot of stuff that I think that we'd have to get in there to make sure that we had some kind of regulation, and I'm not sure what the regulation is on the Casper facility, you know. But those whole things, that just goes through your regular due diligence. If you're making an investment, you go through and you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and it's unclear whether or not we could, if we had rules and we were contemplating some way that you could make it safer and do all of those things, whether or not the rulemaking authority was broad enough for that to actually to be a legal rule. So those are the things where, you know, trying to get the meat on the bone. And I'm not trying to you know, throw cold water on this, Mr. Chairman or Senator. I'm just saying these are some of the things that I think that you want to try to contemplate in the rulemaking authority that necessarily don't give us express direction. So, you know, I think Patrick wants to weigh in here. I think he's got a lot more experience in dealing with or understanding some of these things more than I do. But yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, we'll turn over to Patrick, and there's some questions there.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here. I just want to, just to follow up Senator French while you got here, while I got him here too, looking at my notes, these vaulting places, storage facilities, class 3 vaults. I mean, especially Mr. Treasurer, you've been to the one in Casper. We went on a tour of that. You saw the physical, you talked to the operators there. And it's, I mean, this is not just a ma-pa vaulting operation. This is kind of a Fort Knox of the West. And, they do quarterly audits of that. The state treasurer can come and visit anytime they want and inspect. I mean, they verify the quality of the gold in there. They authenticate it. I mean, you can watch them do it if you want to. If you have a trash can full, you can watch watch them authenticate it. So anyway, and just last little comments here. I mean, it's not just a hedge against inflation. I mean, gold has outperformed the S&P in the last 25 years. It's outperformed bonds in the last 50 years. I mean, obviously you want the discretion, and your chief investment officer has done a good job. I'm not disparaging that at all, but we should hold gold. It's a good diversification. And, all of the complications of it sound big, but they're pretty simple. I mean, yourself, Mr. Treasurer, once you buy an ounce of gold, you start figuring out how to protect it the best you can. And so with that, I'll be quiet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer?
We're gonna let Patrick have it.
Can you hear us? Mr. Fleming?
Yes. It's Patrick Fleming here, CIO for the Treasurer's Office. And I do want to comment on a few things on this. Yes, first of all, personally, I do believe in gold and silver. And I just went and looked back of when I first made my purchase, and I bought silver in 1991, and I just didn't have enough money at that time to buy gold. But I'm a big believer in the asset class from a personal standpoint. The difference is from a fund perspective, we have all kinds of different avenues to hedge inflation, dollar devaluations, et cetera, where gold does very well. So for instance, just in inflation, there's an instrument called Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. They're called TIPS. They go up with inflation. Real estate goes up with inflation. Our mineral company ownership in our stock portfolio does very well. Same with the energy. The E&P sectors have very high correlation. We have over $1 billion in master limited partnerships, pipelines. So these are the things that do, extremely well in inflationary periods. The dollar devaluation, we have over $4 billion in non-dollar securities in our portfolio. So we have the ability to purchase gold if we wanted to. We don't have the ability to store it under current regulations and so forth. But the problem is the performance. So I did have a conversation with Senator Ide before, and he mentioned about since the beginning of the year. And so I just went back and checked my numbers, and I ran all of the numbers last night of the S&P 500's total return versus gold over a 1, 3, 5, 20, 25 years, which, he just mentioned from the turn of the century, and 30 years. Gold has outperformed the S&P only in the 3-year period. Every other period, the S&P has outperformed. Over 30 years, it has outperformed gold by 1,534%. Over 10 years, 158%. So I'm not sure where he's getting his numbers, but I have a chart here I can show you. If you want me to, if I'm able to share, I could show you a 30-year chart of the S&P versus gold. Would the committee care to see that chart?
Yes, we'd love to see the chart. Donna, can you bring that up?
Mr. Fleming should be able to share from where he is.
Are you able to see this chart?
Yes, sir.
So the top line is the S&P 500 Total Return Index. The bottom line is gold over the last 30 years. That's the 1,534% outperformance of the S&P versus gold over this period. So from a CIO looking to invest in the highest risk-adjusted return instrument, that's our mandate. We want to have the best risk-adjusted return. And so the other part of it is risk. And one of the metrics that we use is called a Sharpe ratio. And all it is, you know, the return of an instrument by the volatility of the instrument. So if you look over the last 10 years, the S&P had a Sharpe of 1.1, and that's very good. Anything above 1 is outstanding. Gold was 0.38. So gold was a third more risky, or 3 times more risky than the S&P. So not only does it fail on the total return, you know, this, you know, could the next 1, 3, 5, 10, 30 years, you know, gold outperform? You know, I'm not sure, but where's NVIDIA going to be in 30 years? You know, let's do a build to buy NVIDIA. That's just not how we operate. So what we look at is historical performance, look at what's going on. And I agree, the dollar, you know, the dollar is extremely high right now. You know, even though we have this massive debt, that is not the way it's supposed to be. And yet no one seems to care. At some point, I do believe they care, but currently they don't. So from all of the metrics that we use to invest in gold, you know, it fails. The other point that's super important for us is gold doesn't pay a dividend. So with our spending policy of 5%, the assets that we purchase, having the ability to spend that income to make that 5% spend is extremely important. And so, you know, then Senator Case was talking about what about storage costs and so forth. We've looked into this. So the best way that we came up with, the cheapest, best way to get pure gold would actually buy gold futures, take delivery of the gold, which, you know, is in the East Coast. You can hire, you know, the carrier, insure it, everything else, bring it to Wyoming, put it into a vault, and then there's storage cost. The numbers that you see above you do not have storage costs imputed into that. If they were, the difference would even be higher. So, you know, looking at it, it's just very, very, very difficult to go through and do this. As the senator talked about, there's bid offer costs. How would we reweight? Well, let's say we had a percentage allocation to gold. Let's just say it was 2%. If that allocation got above 2%, then we would sell. And yes, that money, that capital gains that we would realize would go into the general fund. So it's not that, as you know, personally, I think it really makes sense for an individual, but I don't have the ability like the fund has to hedge out these various risks that we talked about. So in that light, you know, it hasn't made sense from my standpoint, from our consultant standpoint, and our investment committee standpoint, and the SLIB board, which we talk to them about every year at our asset allocation. We're going to have an asset allocation meeting in April, and we could bring it up again then saying, do you think it makes sense to own gold? With all of these factors that we're very well aware of, when Nixon went off the gold standard in 72, all of these different things that we're aware of, it just hasn't passed the test at that time. Could it change in the future? Absolutely. But anyway, I know I kind of rambled on. I tried to answer a bunch of different questions that some of the senators asked, but I'll stand for questions.
Mr. Fleming, my question is, if the dollar tanks, and once again, not being a doomsday person, but if the dollar becomes devalued to the point where it's not worth anything, aren't the markets going to collapse too? So are we looking at this more as an investment or some insurance? I'd like your take on that one, sir.
It would be Armageddon if the dollar collapsed. to zero, whatever, you know, everyone has massive dollar exposure. It's the world's reserve currency. We would be wondering how to feed ourselves if that happened. It would be Armageddon if the dollar went to zero.
Thank you. Senator Case.
I think it is perplexing to folks, I think, to think about how come the United States dollar is so strong when the United States seems to have such fiscal irresponsibility built into our budgeting and you know, our economy for so long. And I don't exactly have all the answers to that, but it is in part, it's because we are the United States and we have a system of government and a system of an economy that is strong and, you know, we're predictable. And so other people want to invest in our currency. Places where things don't work so well, our currency is a very desirable thing because, believe it or not, with all our ups and downs and our problems and our debt, we're still the best place there is for most foreign investment. And so I think that's a consideration. The total collapse of our economy, which is, I've read lots about people that believe that we're amazingly strong. And I'm not sure that gold is going to be that valuable if we had a total collapse of our economy. You know, it's what will people want to trade for? Would you rather have food or would you rather have gold? Well, if you're hungry, you'd rather have food. You'd rather have fuel. You'd rather have, so the Armageddon kind of scenario, I think despite all its faults, the dollar is actually still pretty good. And I do think we have inflation there, and it's inflation driven by a government policy. The Inflation Reduction Act, that was just, can't even believe we can say that with a straight face. And we do have constant deficit spending that is doesn't seem to have anything rein in, which causes inflation. But it's still the safest and the best place for people to do business, to depend on economic returns and to count on their government doing the right thing. I don't know if Mr. Fleming would agree with that, perhaps in broad brush or not, but that's where I come from. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator, yeah, you're spot on. The dollar, if you look at the dollar index, it's at, you know, multi-year highs. It's extremely strong, and yet we have this massive deficit. There's Japan has a 225% debt to GDP level, and yet they haven't collapsed. So in the past, these levels that were thought to bring stress have not happened. So the U.S. is projected to have a 200% debt to GDP level over the next, I believe, 2050 by the CBO that Senator Hyde mentioned. So yes, our debt levels are going up, and yet we haven't had it. I do believe that we will, and that we're going to start to see pressure. But we're already starting to see it in the long end of the Treasury curve, that as debt levels go up, I'm getting into technical terms, but the term premium in interest rates are now going up for the first time in years. So we are starting to see it, but it hasn't hit the level of catastrophe. And with our interest rates going higher, it's propelled the dollar higher. So, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but we do have all kinds of other securities that would do well in that environment.
Senator
And
Hyde.
one thing I just want to comment on when I talked about all those years, the 3-year scenario is the only one in the 1, 3, 5, 10, 20, 25, and 30. Gold did outperform the S&P over a 3-year scenario by 75 basis points a year. So I did want to clarify that it hasn't underperformed every single one, only the 3-year area where gold did outperform. Over the last 3 years, gold outperformed S&P 500 by 75 basis points annually. or 225 over 3 years, 2.25%.
Senator Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for testifying, Mr. Fleming. You know, we could cherry pick the returns. The good chairman here kind of brought up the key point on this. This is a diversification to protect an insurance policy. I mean, everything that you're talking about to protect us from inflation are, you know, dollar-denominated assets. And that's what we're trying to get away from here with this bill. We're trying to diversify this portfolio for a potential calamity and not have all of our eggs in one basket. I know you guys have invested in third world debt before, which is you know, multiples of what we're asking for here in this this gold bill that didn't turn out so good. So I think that this diversification and insurance policy is the crux of what we're trying to accomplish here, and insure against the dollar eventually going. I mean, that's why when we first ran this, tried to get something in 2019 to add on to the Wyoming Legal Tender Act, the price of gold is more than double than it was from 2019, and we still don't own any gold. So I'll rest my case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer.
$1 million if I could, but I can't get it by everybody that's basically stopping me on that thing. I don't know whether it's a good investment or not. I know I had some here and they were in ETFs, two of them. One ETF was going up and the other one was going down the same day. I couldn't figure out why that was happening. So physical gold is probably the better way to do it. But I want to move into the bill in section 3. I really think that this probably should be that the legislature may contract to conduct a study. And the reason for that, I think, is to get us some third party, I guess, reference in the issues that are kind of before us here. And so I think there's probably people out there that can do a study and do it probably the way you guys want to figure out you know what the answers are in these different things. From what I've looked at is that you can kind of pick and choose when you begin your study and when you don't do your study, and you can get different answers, you know, depending on the timelines and different things and the way you ask the question. So I'm hoping that if you guys direct something, and maybe through the management audit committee or maybe through another third party deal, that we can get something here. I talked to you know, the folks over at WRS, because they've been in gold, I think, probably for the last 3 years, and a lot of that really is, you know, and this is something Patrick says all the time, is that something well bought is half sold, you know. And so I can't tell you whether or not we're at the high of this thing. There's going to be a lot of froth, you know, in the world economy. The Chinese, they're not as strong as they used to be. Their currency isn't as strong as it used to be. They're trying to devalue it so to take care of the tariffs that they know are going to show up. So, you know, there's all of these games that people are playing with their currencies across there. And even Doge or not, I don't think we're going to get our spending under control. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I just?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So to sum up, I do believe, just to back up the treasurer, about if this bill were to pass and it said the treasurer shall invest in gold or hold specie, then I believe what would happen is that would then be incorporated into our investment policy statement. I don't believe, Treasurer and I were talking about this before, I don't believe that would require an AG's opinion. If the legislature told us we had to invest in it, well, then we would incorporate that into our investment policy statement and our guys would invest in it. And when the treasurer talks about WRS investing in gold, they invest in gold, they do not hold gold. So that is a clarification. If the bill does move forward, I respectfully ask you to remove the shall provisions for promulgating rules. There are no rules that need to be promulgated that I can see, and that just adds a onus on our office that I would prefer not to have. And then, and moving into section 3, when the treasurer talks about this study that is required, I don't think it is the role of the treasurer's office to determine, it's a policy decision, talking about stabilizing and ensuring the economic security of Wyoming and its citizens. I think that's a much bigger ask and responsibility that doesn't necessarily rely within our office to procure on behalf of the legislature. I think, so I would respectfully ask that if you do want that study to occur, that you would ask your staff to do it, or someone who has economic, maybe the economic analysis division. I hate to throw anybody under the bus, but that's just not within our purview. We don't have that expertise. And then recommendations, we would be loath to make recommendations to you for, you make all the recommendations and we come in and tell you why we don't like them, right? So, so I think that's more appropriate for you all to do. And then if you do leave this language in here, this is just a little tiny note on line 19, page 3. The committee is the Committee on Capital Financing and Investments, and the word capital is missing from that. So should you decide to move forward with that, then you probably just want to correct that. And I would also add, Mr. Chairman, that if you decide to leave the direction for a study, there is no funding in the bill for a study. So I think that because there is no, I don't know that any of us, I know not in the treasurer's office for sure, we don't have the expertise that would be required to conduct this study such that we wouldn't be able have to require or to be procure an outside consultant to do the study. That just wouldn't be within our wheelhouse to be able to do that. And there was one more thing, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to back up. If the language here on page 2 in subsection B, the state treasurer shall require, maybe that's not, there was one place where it was saying that we needed to review financial statements.
Financial disclosure.
And we needed to, okay. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just conclude my comments there.
Thank you.
For me, I think that the places that really are kind of inoperable is that one where we take accounts out and put it in the permanent funds, because that is just.
Could you turn your speaker up there?
That Romanet I on the top of page 2. And so what you do is delete between and across all and insert within any permanent state, and then delete managed, but any permanent state managed in accounts, delete managed in accounts within any permanent state fund. And so that kind of gets us away from having hundreds of accounts and getting it down to where the money's at. Yeah, so I think that's reasonable. And I think you guys can find out so much more if the legislature writes the contract and puts money in it, so you can find somebody to actually look at all the different things that you want to try to do. I know that Senator Ide and I have talked about what we probably maybe could do in different areas if we were, doing with taxes and doing that, and how that would probably function at the Casper Mint. But if you've got a third party that actually lends some I think, puts some meat on the bone on that, then when you get into the legislative process, there's no hearsay, it's just right down the line.
Do we have any other public comment? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Welcome to Revenue.
my name is Kathy Ide, and I'm the wife of Senator Ide and Chief of Staff at the Ide household. Anyway, I know that the Treasurer's Office was inquiring about what the storage fees would be on the $10 million, and I was able to get a hold of the CEO of the Casper Storage Facility. And he stated that it would be approximately 0.25% per annum. And I believe that the state had said a couple years ago that it would be 0.5%, but that's incorrect. It would be closer to 0.25%. And when you consider it, ETF management fees of 0.40%, seems like a screaming deal to me. So that's all I came to say, to offer that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Cowan, Sweetwater County Treasurer. Thanks for having this robust discussion today. Just a couple thoughts on gold. I am a fan of gold, but just a couple thoughts as we go through this discussion. Back in 1933, when we came off the gold standard, it became illegal by executive order to hoard gold. And so all gold was required to turn back into the US Treasury. The US Treasury is the largest gold holder. We hold over 8,000 tons of gold. The next closest is Germany at 3,000 tons. So should the US dollar fail and we go back to the gold standard, he who has the most gold wins. And that essentially would be what would happen. A new dollar would be issued. It's unfeasible for us to use bullion as currency in our current state. And I think it would be unfeasible should the dollar fail for us to go to that. Even in the Treasurer's office, if somebody wanted to come in and pay, as we went through the bill a couple of years ago, it's very difficult because we don't have the scales, we don't have the change. It would be required for us to hold that as currency and could be losing value or gaining value on that bullion that we're holding to try and give change back to people. So I really don't think that it's feasible that we ever go back to gold as a currency. I think if we talk about holding this as an asset, makes sense maybe to hold it as an asset, but I really don't think that it does the state any good as a return on investment. As we saw Mr. Fleming testify, it just doesn't do well for us there. So I think we just need to have this conversation as holding gold as an asset. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Go ahead, Senator Wright.
I'll keep it short. We got to get back to that. As far as the argument on the investment, I disagree with you. I mean, it has doubled in the last 5 years, and you can't argue that, and you do hold it, and it is not a claim check, and where everything else we own is a claim check. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I'll just respond really quickly if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, again, if the US government and the dollar fails, the US government files an executive order to return those gold assets to them, it becomes worthless.
On a side note, I'm pretty sure if we get purely into the Constitution, paper money's unconstitutional. It's all supposed to be coinage.
Yep.
But I just throw that out there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
What's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Second.
It's been moved by Senator Ide, seconded by Senator French. Any comments or discussion? Senator Pappas.
I would like to make one amendment, please. On page 3, line 7, strike the word, or first of all, line 1, strike the word shall and put may. On line 7, strike the word shall and place may. And on line 16, add the word any before study.
Back up. Start that one over again. What you said.
Line 16, the second word, after the first word, the, put results of any, strike the word the and replace it with any. And then after study, put conducted, strike the word required. So it would read results of any study conducted under subsection A. Oh, yes, and thank you. And on line 15, there's another shall that should become may. Okay, are we okay? Okay. So, those, that would be my amendment.
I think what we're gonna do, because of the time crunch we're in, we're gonna hold this over till Friday, and it'll be the first order of business.
We're in the middle of an amendment right now. I moved it. You're gonna, I can withdraw it if you want.
No, that's fine too.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we are under time crunch. I think we should lay it over, but I think we should vote on that amendment and then take it up Friday.
So first, Mr. Chairman, for Senator Case's benefit, I'm just changing all the, on line, on page 3, changing all the mays, or all the shalls to may. There's one on line 1, there's one on line 7, and there's one on line 15. And then I'm saying that on line 16, the results of any study conducted under this section, since it's not required anymore.
Just for clarification, does include the one on page 1, line 14?
Did I miss one?
Okay,
No, not that one.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of Senator Paps's amendment to Senate File 96, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Nay. That amendment has been defeated. Gentlemen, my plan on this is, we'll take it up again on Friday. That'll give everybody a chance to take a couple minutes and actually put some thoughtful amendments if they want to it.
Fair enough.
I hate to rush through this, and unfortunately, we have that caucus, and I'm the dancing chicken.